who aren't able to be present with us at the moment will be able to see a copy of this schedule. So on behalf of Dr. Lynn Reader, National Director of the Australian Compassion Council, and our Australian Compassion Council team and sector coordinators, it's my very great privilege to welcome you from across the Australian continent and around the world to this launch event for our 2024 National Day of Compassion. I'm your host for this launch event. My name is Terry Ayling, and I'm the Compassionate Cities Lead for the Australian Compassion Council and facilitator of Compassionate Gold Coast. This is our fourth National Day of Compassion, with our previous themes being Deep Dreaming, Australia, a Continent for Compassion, Deep Listening, and Deep Wisdom. The 21st of September is recognised as the United Nations International Day of Peace, and it's a day of many events, which means some are unable to join us today. We join with them and people around the world that seek compassion and peace, not only on this day, but into the future. Our National Day of Compassion theme this year is Deep Connection. It proposes another practical step in moving towards our aspiration for Australia, a continent for compassion. And each of the sessions which follow throughout the day invite reflection on aspects of deep connection and prompt a call to action in terms of reaching for deeper connections with ourselves, with others, with the people around us and the communities of which we are part. Importantly, our place, history and culture, and then a reaching out through our own sphere of influence. It is our hope that in the next 50 minutes, our global and national speakers will stir in you a desire for deeper connection and offer some practical means for achieving them. Last year's National Day was held just prior to a national referendum on the recognition of First Nations people in the Australian Constitution and a First Nations voice to Parliament. The Australian Compassion Council's resource, the Why of the Voice, and our National Day reflected the ACC's strong commitment to First Nations people if we are truly to become a continent for compassion. While sadly the referendum was defeated, the Australian Compassion Council's commitment continues and is reflected in the words of our acknowledgement of country. As we gather, we acknowledge that for thousands of years, Indigenous people have walked in this land on their own country. Their relationship with the land is at the very centre of their lives. Their spirituality is inextricably connected to ours. We acknowledge the people of many tribes, mobs and language groups across Australia and the Torres Strait, and we pay our deep respect to their leaders, past, present and emerging. With compassion, we acknowledge First Nations people's stewardship as custodians of the land. It is with gratitude that we share this land today. And it is with sorrow we acknowledge the cost of that sharing, which has caused intergenerational trauma, from unspoken acts of historical violence, removal of children from their homes, gaps in housing, healthcare and medical services, which have materialised in disproportionate rates of infant death and early mortality, suicide, incarceration, especially of young people, addictive behaviours, domestic and family violence, and chronic disease. Our deep hope is that we can move forward together to a Makarrata, a place where First Nations people's voice is listened for and heard, and where healing can take place on the way to treaty and a future of truth-telling, of justice, and of enduring peace. We welcome those that are joining us and apologise for our delayed start due to an incorrect Zoom link. If you have other friends that are listening in, we'd encourage you to share this link with them. And for those who may miss out, we're going to record this session and make it available to others subsequently. As the Australian Compassion Council continues to deep dream Australia a continent for compassion, we are working with the principles outlined in Tyson Yunkaporta's book, Sand Talk, How Indigenous Thinking Can Save the World, and integrate his 5 mindsets into the work of the Charter. We also see recognition of our common humanity as prerequisite to expressions of compassion and of the need for wisdom in determining the ways we exercise compassion. Last year, in launching our National Day theme of Deep Wisdom, we looked at the gleaning of wisdom from different cultural, psychological, and spiritual perspectives, and the ways we may exercise wisdom in contemporary society and leadership, in transformative change, in education, politics, ageing, and imagining futures. During the year, we continued to explore the deep wisdom theme in the webinars we facilitated and with projects in our compassionate cities of Ballarat and the Gold Coast and our annual Compassion Scholars Forum. This year's theme, Deep Connection, launches our next year of exploration and discovery, as we are reminded that the qualitative depths of our connection enhance our sense of common humanity, invigorate our desire for compassionate action, and inform the wisdom which shapes those actions. So in joining us here, and with the invitation to join our sessions throughout the day, we invite you to share with us throughout this year and into the future in this movement for Australia as the first continent for compassion. And a brief reminder here that if you're on this session, you can use this corrected link to join each of the other sessions throughout the day. Our first speaker this morning is Marilyn Turkovich, Executive Director of the Global Charter for Compassion, based in Seattle, Washington, the United States. Marilyn is a powerhouse of this dynamic global organisation. She is an educator, network, collaborator, and encourager. And her contribution to the work of the Charter since 2013 and her support for our work for compassion here in Australia is highly valued. We knew that Marilyn wouldn't be able to join us this morning as she is in Monterrey, Mexico, where the Charter is facilitating an extraordinary event, the World Summit of Nobel Laureates for Peace. However, Marilyn sends her best wishes and this special video message for us today.
Hello, everyone. It's an honor to be here with Compassionate Australia to celebrate International Peace Day, a day that invites us to reflect on how we together can create a more peaceful and compassionate world. Today, I want to talk about how peace building starts with compassion and share a few inspiring examples of peace efforts happening across Australia, as well as an exciting announcement about this year's Karen Armstrong Humanitarian Awards. At the heart of peace building is a simple yet profound idea: compassion. The Charter for Compassion, which unites people across cultures, religions, and nations, believes that compassion is essential for peace. It is not just about empathy, it is about action. It's about listening to each other, recognizing our shared humanity, and finding ways to work together to address the root causes of conflict and division. Through initiatives like Compassionate Cities, Peace Education, and global campaigns, the Charter supports efforts to bring communities together, encourage dialogue, and promote justice. By building compassionate communities, we are laying the foundation for long-lasting peace. This work isn't theoretical. It's happening right now on the ground in cities and regions around the world, including right there in Australia. Across Australia, we are seeing incredible examples of compassionate peace building in action. Here's a few. Compassionate Ballarat in Victoria. The city of Ballarat has become a beacon of hope by bringing the community together through compassionate initiatives. Their work on addressing social isolation and fostering community cohesion is a model of how cities can be at the forefront of peace building. Nationwide, the ongoing reconciliation process with Indigenous communities is a powerful step towards peace, acknowledging and healing from the past while fostering respectful relationships with Indigenous Australians is essential for a more peaceful and just future. In Perth, the focus on mental health and well-being, particularly in schools and youth programs, is creating safer, more connected communities where young people are supported and empowered to thrive in a compassionate environment. These are just a few examples of the powerful work happening in Australia that show how compassion can lead the way towards peace. I encourage all of us to continue supporting and celebrating these efforts because they show what's possible when we come together. As we celebrate peace today, I'm also thrilled to share some exciting news about this year's Karen Armstrong Humanitarian Awards. These awards recognize individuals and organizations whose work exemplifies compassion in action and whose contributions have had a profound impact on global peace. This year, we are honoring Kailash Satyarthi, a tireless advocate for children's rights, whose work has freed thousands of children from forced labor and slavery. His commitment to justice and compassion has created a movement that fights for the dignity of all children. The second award we're giving is to Rigoberta Menchú, a Nobel Prize laureate from Guatemala, whose activism for the rights of Indigenous people and her advocacy for peace and human rights have inspired millions of people worldwide. She was also instrumental in helping to forge ahead with the Declaration of Indigenous People at the UN. Our third recipient is Peace Jam, an organization that empowers young people to tackle some of the world's toughest challenges, teaching them that peace begins with compassion and action in their own communities. And the last award we're giving this year is to Seeds of Peace, which brings together young people from conflict regions to engage in dialogue, understand each other's perspectives, and build a future based on understanding and compassion. These awardees exemplify what it means to build peace through compassion. They remind us that no matter how daunting the challenge may seem, compassionate action can transform lives, break cycles of violence, and build the foundation for a more peaceful world. We're so fortunate this year during this time period to be in Monterrey, Mexico for the 19th summit of the Nobel Peace Laureates, in which the Charter for Compassion is offering different venues, including panels, speakers, as well as our gala presenting the Karen Armstrong Awards. In closing, let's remember that peace begins with us. It begins with the compassionate choices we make every day in our communities, in our relationships, and in our efforts to listen, understand, and support one another. The Charter for Compassion and its many partners across the world, including here in Australia, are dedicated to building a future where compassion is the norm and peace the result. Thank you. Let's continue this journey together.
Thank you, Marilyn. Where compassion is the norm and peace is the outcome. A wonderful link between our National Day of Compassion here in Australia and the United Nations International Day of Peace. Our next speaker, Hugh MacKay, AO, has been a champion of deep connection and compassion across the country and serves as the National Ambassador for the Charter for Compassion in Australia. Hugh is a social psychologist with a 60-year career as a social researcher, 25 years as a weekly columnist, and best-selling author of 21 books, including The Good Life, The Art of Belonging, Australia Reimagined, and his latest, The Way We Are, Lessons from a Lifetime of Listening. Described as something of a national treasure and one of this country's most perceptive social commentators, we are grateful for Hugh's generous work for the Charter in his role as an ambassador, and thank him again for his contribution today. Please join me in welcoming our National Ambassador, Hugh MacKay.
Thank you very much, Terry, and good morning, everyone. And right at the beginning of a reflection like this, and following those inspiring words from Marilyn, I believe it's absolutely crucial that we pause for a moment and reflect on what it means to be human. That's the starting point for a day like this. What does it mean to be human? It means that we belong to a social species. We are born, in the sense that it is actually in our DNA, we are born to cooperate, to communicate, and above all, we're born to connect. That's what being human means. We need each other. We humans are hopeless in isolation. We need communities of all kinds, families, neighborhoods, work colleagues, friends, ukulele bands, choirs, community gardens, any kind of group, any kind of community we need to connect with in order to give us that sense of belonging, which is so fundamental to the mental and emotional health of people like us who belong to a social species. It's easy to get obsessed about how special I am, how unique, how different. All of that is interesting, but the most significant, the most wonderful thing about us is the common humanity that we all share. There's a beautiful symmetry about being human. We need communities to nurture and sustain us. As I've already said, we're hopeless on our own. We herd animals are hopeless when we're cut off from the herd. So we need communities to nurture and sustain us, and communities need us to engage and connect if they are to survive, let alone flourish. That's the symmetry of being human. And yet, here's a tragic thing to have to say. Australia, 2024, populated by human beings who are born to connect, and yet we're lonelier than ever. We have epidemics of loneliness, of anxiety, of depression. Social isolation has become our number one public health issue because for members of a social species, social isolation is a dangerous state to be in. When we're disconnected, we're at risk, of course, of loneliness, anxiety, depression, but hypertension, inflammation, sleep disorders, even reduced life expectancy is associated with social isolation, which is no surprise because of the species we've been born into. So the need for deep connection, the need to reassess the need for connection is absolutely urgent. And how do we do it? Well, let me offer 3 very simple steps towards deep connection. First, reach out. There's no point in just dreaming about deep connection. Connection only happens when someone reaches out to another, when someone commits to engagement with a local neighbourhood, a community of whatever kind. Don't wait for someone else to reach out. In fact, those of us who are not socially isolated have an obligation, not just a social obligation, a moral obligation to our species to reach out to those who are at risk of social isolation. Be aware of those in your apartment block, those in your street, those in your local neighbourhood, your community, who are at risk of social isolation and go to them, connect. Doesn't have to sound deep and meaningful. It can just be "G'day," or "I made too much soup today. Can I give you some?" Or "Do you want to have a cup of coffee?" Or anything. Reach out. Number 2, be present. Just being around someone isn't enough. Be present to them. And how do you demonstrate that you're being present to another person? You do it with eye contact. You can't do it as we're doing it right at this moment via a screen. No. Human connection absolutely depends on eye contact. Eye contact is the superhighway to the brain and metaphorically to the heart. If you doubt the importance of it, just remember what it's like trying to talk to someone who avoids making eye contact. So reach out, be present, and number 3, listen. We've covered listen on previous days of compassion, but it's absolutely central. Marilyn mentioned it as well. Attentive and compassionate and sensitive listening to another person is the only way that we can really connect with them. Deep connection via reaching out, making eye contact, listening transforms us. But more importantly, it transforms our communities. Thank you, Terry.
Thanks so much, Hugh. Always just terrific practical wisdom. We really appreciate it, and all that you offer for the Charter and for our country. Thank you. Dr. Mark Crosweller, AFSM, is Director at Ethical Intelligence and serves as a member of our Australian Compassion Council. Mark has 38 years' experience in crisis, national security and emergency management, and has led major strategic reform in governance, strategy, policy, operations, and capability. Most recently, Mark has served as head of the National Resilience Task Force and Director General of Emergency Management Australia. With a PhD in philosophy and a mature Buddhist practice, Mark is presenter of the Allegorical Life blog and podcast. In August this year, with a great sense of humility and satisfaction, Mark said, he launched his book, Compassion in Disaster Management, The Essential Ethic of Relational Leadership. He shared something of his insights with CEOs in a webinar facilitated by Compassion at Ballarat. And today, we welcome him as he shares some further insights with us on this National Day of Compassion. Thank you, Mark.
Good morning, Terry. Thank you very much for a very kind introduction. Good morning, friends and colleagues. I've had just ticking over 40 years of experience in crisis and disaster management, and some people might say my life has been one big disaster. And I would reply by saying, if only you knew. We all remember 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago now, the great disaster season of 2019-2020. And it was a milestone event, I think, for the continent of Australia. It was the worst disaster season we had experienced. We lost many people. We lost over 50 lives, millions of hectares of land through flood and fire, and billions of animals, not to mention the economic costs, which ran into the tens of billions of dollars. And it was really a wake-up moment, I think, for our politicians who had, many of them, had for many years denied the causes and effects of climate change. And we had a real lived experience of not only the causes, but the effects. And I saw a pivot in the politics of Australia around the thinking of climate change. Unfortunately, I didn't quite see a pivot in the policy platform for a couple more years following, but it woke us up. It really woke us up to how much of a problem we were in with climate and how much suffering it was causing to humans and to non-humans. These increasingly intense and frequent events are going to continue and intensify even further. So we're not in a new normal. We're at the start of a trajectory, and we need to think about that in profound ways. I think what it's showing to me and what it showed in my research and what I talk about in my book is that we used to be safe, institutions and governments and their leaders in disaster management could be quite safe in their expertise and their performance at lower levels of intensity and frequency. and look pretty good, essentially. But now climate is showing us, Mother Nature is showing us that we're all becoming vulnerable, that governments, citizens, and their leaders are all sharing in a space of vulnerability, albeit in a different way. So we're all susceptible to being harmed with the inability to cope. And it invites us it invites us in to think about a relational construct. But unfortunately, inside the system, we see people who deny their vulnerability, deny their suffering of themselves and of others, disavow and ignore it. And that is deeply problematic. We find systems that deny their vulnerability and their ability to be otherwise compassionate become insensitive to the needs of others. That insensitivity drives an insufficiency. The response to that suffering is insufficient. The system can often be very compliant with its own regimes and frameworks and regulation and legislation, and it's safe to be there. There's no risk involved in complying with the laws of the land and the frameworks and the policies of disaster management. And of course, when criticised, the system can get very defensive. All that leads us to be disconnected, to Hugh's point. And because we're born for connection, being disconnected is deeply troubling and problematic. But fortunately, there's another opportunity, and it's a relational opportunity. And what I found in my research was that leaders who did connect into their own suffering, saw, sensed and felt it, and saw, sensed and felt it in others, established their relationality, established their humanness, established a sense of connection. It profoundly motivated them to do something about it, to help another person, to help themselves, to act compassionately. They often had to take great personal risk. They had to be venturous. They just had to step outside of comfort zones, had to step in the face of their regulations and frameworks and policies and standards, and undertake actions which were incredibly brave and courageous, but important nonetheless. And of course, they maintained their accountability to the people that were there to lead, serve and protect. So my message today is quite simple, really, that Mother Nature, through her expressions of forces of earth, wind, fire and water that we call natural disasters, are inviting us to become more relational, more compassionate with ourselves, with others, and with the earth system. We must accept her invitation if we are to grant future generations their wish for a more peaceful, fulfilling world. Relationality is the key to leadership in public service, in private sector, in family, in community. We ought never forget that. If we want a more peaceful and compassionate world, we must, in essence, be relational. Thanks, Terry.
Thank you, Mark. And it's clear that without any kind of scripting, that what Marilyn and what Hugh and what Mark have shared resonate in many, many ways. Dr. Lynn Reader is a pioneer of empathy and compassion in Australia. She is our National Director of the Australian Compassion Council, a member of the Compassionate Ballarat Steering Group, and serves on the Global Board of Trustees of the Executive Committee of the Charter. Lynn is an adjunct research fellow at Federation University, where she undertakes research into evidence base of empathy and compassion. In 2019, she commenced an annual ACC Compassion Scholars Forum at Sydney University Business School. Lynn is also founder of the Mindful Futures Network and a board director of the public interest think tank Australia 21. Lynn works tirelessly as a full-time volunteer for the Charter for Compassion at a global, national and local level. Without her, very little work of the Charter in Australia would have been dreamt, initiated, developed or sustained. As we welcome Lynn now to share just one practical expression of her collaborative and transformative work, we acknowledge that this is probably the youngest median cohort of participants on a Charter event we've had for some time. It's lovely to see so many young people. I'm not sure that they're more awake than we are. They look as though they're still in their jammies and they haven't done their hair yet. Perhaps not up to drinking coffee, but it's delightful to welcome Lynn and these students from Ballarat to share a wonderful story of what they've been doing this year. Thank you, Lynn, and welcome to our young friends and compassion champions.
Well, thank you very much, Terry. Yeah, so our presentation is about a local charter project. This one was done, as you say, through Compassionate Ballarat. Probably most of you will know that Ballarat is a regional town in Victoria and one with a history steeped in the gold rush of the 1800s. The background to this project is that early this year, Ballarat witnessed a number of traumatic events, and the City Council came to us and said, could Compassionate Ballarat support them in a community-wide project to assist the residents dealing with the suffering associated with these distressing events. So one of the key foundational stories of Ballarat is that it is a garden city whose designers cared for our environment and beautified the city. So this project included a proposal to also work with Ballarat Parks and Gardens to plant a garden bed as a visual image of this project. So the purpose of this project was to plant seeds of compassion to promote Ballarat as a caring city, underpinned by the compassionate wishes of its future leaders. Wishes are powerful tools for identifying what we want to see, and they work by clarifying the details of that vision. Positive psychology has sought to understand how where we put our attention stimulates our brain to see new opportunities. The saying goes, where you place your attention is where you place your energy. So for this project, compassionate wishes were collected from participating schools, and these have now been captured into a book, and we will be sharing that across Ballarat with a call to action for people in our town to help these wishes come true. But we're also going to distribute those through compassionate cities across the world. It's a great opportunity that we have as being part of a global organisation, that we have those global connections. So over 100 wishes were received from the students in Year 6 and Year 10 classes. And then having received those wishes, we subject them to a content analysis, which helps identify some themes and concepts. And it was wonderful because the students didn't wish for more skate parks or things for themselves. They were just so generous in their wishes for our city. And the themes that emerged were theme 1 was inclusion, acceptance, belonging. Theme 2, respect, unity, peace. Theme 3, safe. They wanted everyone in Ballarat to feel safe, protected and compassionate. Theme 4, cohesion, harmony, equality. And theme 5, thriving and potential and meaning. So they were just wonderful wishes, and we're very fortunate to have some of the students now from Ballarat Grammar Junior School who are going to read some of those wishes for us today. Thank you. I invite the students to come forward and read those wishes.
I wish we could feel safe on public transport, so Ballarat is a place that can support each other's safety and well-being. Wish 2 is I wish that everyone in Ballarat could have a home and that no one would be outside in winter living on the street.
Beautiful. Thanks, Sylvia. Sienna, is it?
I wish that people can share opinions with respect and equal value.
Oh, we can't. Sylvia, you can just speak up a little bit more. Sorry, darling.
I wish people can share opinions and respect with equal value.
We wish
Will?
that we wish that everyone hang on. We wish that everyone could be themselves without getting judged or shamed. And we wish I wish that people realize that while they can't change the past, they can change the future. Will?
No, wait, hang on. We wish to belong to an inclusive community that stands against violence towards all women.
I wish people could get more chances when they make a mistake.
I wish for people to actually value diversity so we can use all kinds of minds to build community.
And last of all, we wish trust was flowing throughout the community alongside positive, peaceful and pure connections for equality that is constant and secure. We wish for this now more than ever.
Well, I just think truly, if we could bring those to our city, wow, what a different world we would live in. I mean, that's just so inspiring. Thank you so much, Emily, Sienna, Will, Isla, Andre, Austin, and Kailash. They're just so meaningful to hear when you're reading them to us. They're just so wonderful. And thank you so much, as Terry mentioned, for getting up on the first day of the school holidays to be here with us this morning. That was a big effort. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
Wow.
So the philosopher, so just going into next steps, the philosopher Shannon Valor says that our human virtues, which we can see conveyed in the wishes that have just been read to us, hold the key to meeting the tremendous challenges we now all face. Instead, she says, without our virtue and those wonderful wishes, we would not be able to create the new ways we need to flourish together or to deepen the knowledge of who we are and what that means for what we can do together. We know that while healing wishes in themselves are powerful tools, they also need to be implemented. And during the formal launch of this project, where some of these students were present, the Ballarat Mayor invited the participating students to hand their written wishes to him and to the other adults present at that launch as a call to action to all Ballarat residents to help the students' wishes for our city to come true. The students' wishes, as I mentioned, will be distributed across Ballarat, and they will be circulated to cities around the world who have signed the Charter for Compassion. By sharing this book globally, we offer these cities a valuable demonstration project for them to consider replicating. And importantly, Compassionate Ballarat will continue to work with the City Council to make tangible as many of these wishes as possible. Thank you, Terry.
Amazing, Lynn. Just one small example of what's happening right across our continent and around the world as young people, children, lead us with simplicity and wisdom. We're so grateful. Thank you. And please feel free to go back to bed when you need to. We're going to be adult and keep going. Thank you so much. Susan Sumskis is an academic lead at Adult Mental Health with the Health Education and Training Institute. She's also chair of Contemplative Practices and serves as a member of our Compassion Council. We're particularly grateful for Sue's help today with the technology, including recovering things when we got derailed. We welcome Susan as she briefly outlines the rest of our National Day program. You're on mute, Susan. There we go.
And the technological glitches continue with the host forgetting to unmute herself. I apologise, and I also apologise for our glitches today. So I predict that our first session that will run after this session formally concludes, which was scheduled for 9 a.m, might start a little bit later, but we should be running fairly well on time for the rest of the day as each of our planned sessions unfolds. And we have 7 sessions coming up for you. And the first one is with Katie Kiss, who is the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner. And Katie will be talking about the impact of the Voice referendum and the no vote, and the need for Indigenous and non-Indigenous people to deeply connect as allies to maintain momentum on truth-telling and treaty efforts, which are currently underway, and to hold each other up through all of the big challenges that Australia is facing today. Our second session will be live and is with Rivera Sun, who is an author, activist, writer, and editor of Nonviolence News. Rivera will share how she's seen young readers discover their deep-seated compassion, raising their own voices for peace through falling in love with books. Rivera will also talk about the power of literature in sparking imagination towards peace and helping to dissolve the cultural connections that mesmerise us into a war culture. Our third session is with John Hendry, and we're very lucky to also have a musical component of that with a contemporary pianist and instrumental composer, Galliano Sommervilla. John has spent 50 years serving as a teacher, a school counsellor, and in leadership positions, and will speak of deep connection with regard to forgiveness and relationships. And our fourth session is with Sabina Vitaka, who has worked in the corporate mindfulness space for over 15 years, driving transformational positive change across teams and for individuals. In today's interview, Sabina discusses how mindfulness practices bring us into deep connection in our relationships and into synergy with our internal and external environments. Sabina will tell us how to access practical tools to remove distractions and noise and to focus on what matters most, our deep connections. Our fifth session is with Chloe Spackman, who is the CEO of a group called Next 25, which focuses on leadership, global citizenship, innovation, and social impact. Today's fractured political discourse challenges us to recognise how our emotions trigger or interfere with our capacity to hear others. This was particularly so during the Voice referendum, and Chloe will discuss how Next 25's report, Contested Spaces, Australia, the referendum, and constructive discussion sought to review how we can better engage with complex policy issues as a nation and as individuals. Our sixth session is Devon Zuckerman, who is a researcher at the Contemplative Sciences Centre and a climate fellow with the Environmental Institute at the University of Virginia. You'll hear about how we can use our always present connection with the elements, of earth, air, water, and fire to realise interpersonal transformation. And then our final session for the day is our fireside chat, and we invite you all to come along and participate. We will talk about our key messages throughout the day, what we've each gotten from the day, and where we can take that forward as an individual and as a collective. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sue. Bishop Philip Huggins is the Australian Compassion Council National Religion, Interfaith, Spirituality and Environment Coordinator. Former President of the National Council of Churches in Australia, Philip is a passionate advocate and tireless worker for religious and interfaith harmony, nuclear disarmament and world peace, and for the environment. With these in mind, we invite Philip to lead us now in a short, deep connection practice.
Thank you, Terry. So this is just a couple of moments as having this introduction that we've been sharing, and as we orientate to those wonderful sessions that lie ahead through the day. If you've got a piece of paper, you might like just to do a white sheet of paper and put a line down it. It's not essential, but perhaps it's possible. We're just orientating to all that this day holds. So we begin in a practice of gratitude, being aware of our breath, deep breaths in and out, reminding us that we're gifted with life. This Saturday morning on this beautiful planet, in this vast universe, we're down on the ground with one another and the web of life in our island of Australia, king prawns and kookaburras and waratahs and wallabies. Here we are. And on that sheet of paper, you might like, as a practice of our gratitude, just to write the places that for you are places of deep connection. There is home. There are places of worship. There are particular places in creation, beside the beach, sound of Australian birds at dawn, places of connection, deep connection that nurture our souls. And then along the line, the people with whom we have deep connection, of the kind that gives us such peace in our soul, such as safety, the ones that we know we can trust, the ones whose care for us we know we are assured of, the ones whose integrity we cherish, people with whom we have deep connection. Family, old friends, mentors, folk even whom we may never have met, but whom we feel deeply connected to through their music, through their poetry, through their writing, through what we know about the life they've lived. And then also in this gratitude, particular moments of deep connection, moments that have been profoundly illuminating, moments from whence we live that give us such confidence in our capacity for deep communion with one another and with the whole of creation. Particular moments of grace. So then grounding ourselves afresh in the gift of life today, grateful for those places, those people, those moments of deep connection from which we live. We know there's work to be done. And now we go forward into the day, seeing what might be the contribution we can each and together best make. As Hugh said to us, reaching out to those with whom there is no connection or who are disconnected, seeking to be ever present, better present, and to really listen well, so we understand and see what it is that we can do as a matter of deepening connection and enhancing our dream of a compassionate continent of Australia. Into the day we go. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Philip. Dr. Jeffrey Woolcock is the newest member of our Australian Compassion Council. Jeff is a Senior Research Fellow at the University of Southern Queensland's Institute for Resilient Regions, an Adjunct Associate Professor at Griffith University School of Human Services and Social Work and QUT's Centre for Children's Health Research. I'm sure Jeff, as we were, would have been touched by the contribution from the children of a Ballarat grammar school. Jeff is a dynamic, skilled and pragmatic academic whose work is making a world of difference, and we invite him to share with us now.
Thanks kindly, Terry, and I'll be very brief and build on the wonderful contributions we've already heard this morning in the lead into the upcoming sessions, and invite you not just to participate in those sessions, but also very much in the call to action. My great desire to become part of the Compassion Australia, but including involvement in the council, stems from a lot of influences that Terry's already highlighted just in my biography, but in particular with an initiative that me and my great career-long friend and colleague Mike Salvaris set up more than 10 years ago, called the Australian National Index, Australian National Development Index, ANDI, which was really trying to, at that time, ride the wave a wave that's still very much alive about changing the way we measure what matters. But the key in the strapline for Andy as an initiative is the strapline that we've been backing from the outset of Andy is what kind of Australia do we want to live in, and to initiate the kind of conversations that we're having here today in as many parts of Australia as possible. The fact that we then go on to be interested in how we might measure that is secondary to actually that really primary question, a primary question that everyone who's contributed this morning has already provided lots of substance to, which is, you know, what kind of society we want to live in as a species. And we're really building on not just a movement about redefining progress, but you know, thousands of years since Homo sapiens were on the planet about what constitutes progress. I think compassion is right up there with one of the most important facets that we need to do in undertaking that lifelong listening, deep listening journey and deep connection journey. So I invite everyone to participate as much as they can in the day as it's laid out and as Susan and Terry have laid out, but also in you know, went back in your own spaces to find those opportunities for deep connection individually in your homes, wherever you're living, and in your workplaces, or where you are participating in the broader society. And I look forward to the end of today and that fireside discussion for those who can participate in that. Thanks, Terry.
Thank you. And thank you once again for being with us for this launch event. We invite you to join us throughout the day. And for more information about the Charter for Compassion's work in Australia, you can go to our website, charterforcompassion.com.au, and for the global work, charterforcompassion.org. Once again, apologies for the delays in the technology, which will mean that our next session starts probably in about 9:15 or something like that. And that will be my interview with Katie Kiss, the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner. A reminder that if you're on this session, you can use this same modified link to join all other sessions throughout the day. And whilst participants will be muted during the presentation, after each presentation, either live or recorded, there'll be the opportunity for reflections, questions and answers. Thanks once again for joining us, and please continue to join us in this work as we proceed to explore deep connections towards Australia, a continent for compassion. Thank you so much.